Hey guys, so today I'm going to be presenting on the Byodoin Temple or Phoenix Hall, which is located in Japan. This is a piece of architecture in terms of art. So to start off with, if I can get my slides to change. There we go. We will start off with a little bit of background as to the time period this temple was built in. So the period it was built in was known as the Han period in Japan, and this was named after the capital at that time, which was Hienkyo, which means capital of peace and tranquility. The capital had previously been the city of Nara, but was moved to Hienkyo by the Emperor Kamu, who moved it because of Buddhist influences within the government and conflict within the imperial court. And so he wanted to kind of get away from all of that and start over. And so with the movement of the capital, there also came a shift in things like government and literature, as well as religion and paintings. Some of the most famous art pieces from the time were literature, such as The Tale of Genji and The Pillow Book, both of which were written by female writers at the time, who both had a role within the imperial court itself. Following the switch in government, there became these things known as the Fujiwara regents, who were people of the Fujiwara noble family, who would rule kind of in place of other emperors, mainly child emperors at that time. This is the time period in which the Byodoin Temple was actually built. Following that was a period ruled by retired emperors. I didn't really look much into that, seeing as how it's not really related to the topic of this presentation. So, following that, going to the temple itself, it was built and is located in the Yuji Mountains, Japan, which is right outside of Kyoto, which at the time it was built was the city of Hienkyo, which means peace and tranquility if we go back to this previous slide here. But Kyoto is a derivative of the name Hienkyo, but it simply means the capital city. And so going from that, who built the Temple of Byodoin? The temple was built by the Fujiwara Yorimichi, who owned the land that had been owned by his father just outside of Kyoto, where his father had owned a villa there, and after the death of his father, he decided to turn this into a Buddhist temple. The construction of the temple came about in around 1052-1053 BC, which was around 30 years before the end of the Fujiwara Regency. It was built because the family of Yorimichi had a strong connection to the influences of Buddhism, primarily within the Visualization Sutra, which is part of the Pure Land Buddhism, which was popular at the time. The Visualization Sutra is a part of Buddhism that allows a person to kind of visualize themselves transcending into not necessarily nirvana, but a realm of peace, a realm of world not really controlled, but kind of connected to one of the bodhisattvas, Amida, who was a person who had the ability to transcend into nirvana, but remained not, so that they could help others enter into this realm as well. And that is what the Temple of Byodoin is primarily connected to. That is the figure that the temple was built for. Let's see. Yeah, so then going into the actual architecture of this temple, most temples built for Buddhism at this time would have been modeled after a temple previously built for their figure, in this case the figure Amida, but the temple Byodoin was not modeled after any previous temples. The design was new and unique to itself, including like the layout of the land surrounding the temple and other buildings there. Originally there had been over 30 buildings in connection with this temple, but most of them were lost to a fire in 1336. The hall we have remaining today is known as Phoenix Hall, which originally had been known as Amida Hall due to the figure connection there. Today we know this hall as Phoenix Hall though for two reasons. One would be the way it looks from the air, which I will show you in a minute, but the other is due to the decorations on the roof, which are the phoenixes. And I believe these were used as a symbol because they had a connection to peace during that time. And so on top of the roof you have two of these statues on either side of phoenixes. And then if you go up to the aerial view, you can see here that the building itself kind of looks like a bird. You have the two halls off to the side, which resemble wings, and then the central hall, which is the body of the bird. And so it's known today as Phoenix Hall. If we continue to talk about the architecture, even though the layout and building itself is unique in Phoenix Hall, some of the concepts to the structure are actually similar to other buildings, specifically Chinese buildings. And this comes because during the Han period, a lot of culture was still being influenced by Chinese culture, which would include things like their language and their art and writing and even their architecture. So here I have a picture of the Nanpatuo Temple, which was built in the Tang Dynasty in China. And it's kind of, towards the end of the Tang Dynasty, there was a bit of crossover in time periods with the Han period in Japan. And so you can see here kind of similarities within the structure itself. You can see the roof is very similar to that of the Byodoin Temple. You have the opposing ornaments on top, which here seem to resemble sort of like a dragon type figure. Then you have the multiple levels to the roof, as well as the green roof tiles and the sloping roof. And then if you look down towards the columns of the building, the arrangement of these are very similar to the Byodoin Temple as well. And then as far as like the entrance into the temple, it's located in the center as it is with the Byodoin Temple. And so in that you can kind of see how even though Byodoin Temple is unique in how it was the first of its kind, it also has similarities to previous architecture. And today, Phoenix Hall that we have remaining from the Byodoin Temple is considered a national treasure to Japan and also a UNESCO World Heritage Site due to its popularity and use across the years. And so if we go inside the temple and look at the art that it has there, you see mainly the statue of Amida, which was built with the original temple by a famous sculptor of the time named Josha. And the way this statue is built, it may appear to be made out of metal, but it is actually made out of wood. It was built using the joined block wood technique, which was a method developed during this period that allowed for large statues to be built without the wood collapsing under its own weight. And so using that, he made this statue, and then it was coated in gold lacquer to give it the appearance we see here. And then if you look up on the wall surrounding this large statue, you see a bunch of smaller ones. There were 52 of these, and these were smaller statues constructed to depict enlightened beings surrounding Amida. I believe these are no longer in place today. They've been relocated to a museum somewhere in Japan. Also, inside the temple, there are murals lining the walls, and these murals picture things such as Amida's descent to Earth, as well as him welcoming the dead souls into paradise and other actions he would have performed here on Earth. And then, if we look at the temple today, there's not a lot that critics say about the temple itself other than when it was built, how it was built, and why it was built, which would have been for the worship of Buddha. And the reason it had been built outside of the city was because during the Han period, Buddhist temples could not be built within the capital city because the emperor at that time did not want the influence of government and religion crossing over. They were respective of each other and important to each other, but he did not want them ruling one another. But even though it was built outside of the city, it still was very popular because Buddhist religion at that time was the main religion of the court within Japan. And so the Byodoin temple was actually a very important piece of architecture. It was the first of its kind, as previously mentioned, but also there were replications of this temple, both for religious practices and residential purposes. Two examples given were a palace and then a place known as Murakoin, which were, I believe, both residential places in Japan itself, not far from the capital of Kyoto, that were built at a later time than the original temple. Both of these, however, were lost due to flooding, and so they are no longer around today. But one temple we do have that is a replication of the original Phoenix Hall or Byodoin temple is actually located here in the United States in Oahu, Hawaii. It is in the Valley of Temples Memorial Park, but from what I read, it's not really used as a worshiping temple anymore. It's more of a tourist site. It is used for things like weddings and venues for other events, as well as filming for TV shows and movies. But the original temple in Japan itself is still in use today as a Buddhist temple. It is used for the same sections of Buddhism that it was originally used. You have the Jodo and the Tendai sects of Buddhism. The Jodo is the original Pure Land Buddhism that the temple was originally built for. And then the Tendai is actually a sect of Buddhism that kind of allows people to discover their own approach to Buddhism and practices that suit themselves. But the temple today is used for both of these sects jointly. But to wrap it up personally, I think that the Byodoin Hall is pretty beautiful. It's a structure that is unique to itself, and I think it would be interesting to visit this place one day. It seems very peaceful there. But since it was replicated and is still in use today, I think we could say that it is a pretty useful piece of architecture and a pretty interesting piece of art.